Hello and welcome. We're here today talking about a variety of things about Shivambhu. I'm Megan McDonald, and I have with me today Claire Lautier. And Claire was introduced to me actually originally through Molly Mandelberg, who has a really great podcast, which you could also check out, Tactical Magic. And then it turned out that Claire also knew another friend of mine, and Claire hosts a great podcast, Grace Space.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you should check that out as well. And she had me and this friend Charlotte on talking about Shivambu over a year ago. And that we had such a great conversation. It turned into 2 hours of conversation. And although we're only planning on doing an hour today, I can already tell, I know that I'd love to have Claire on again. So we will probably come back and do more too. And what I what part of the reason that I wanted to talk to Claire on my channel after talking to her was that we have a lot of overlap in terms of interest in yoga, interest in meditation, spirituality. Why are we here? Why did our soul choose to incarnate? Why have we come in this time? What is our mission? What is it that we are here to bring to our community, whatever our community is, whether it's a small group or a big group of people? But then there's also that sense of fun and playfulness. And what do I actually enjoy as who I am this time? What lights me up? What makes me happy? And do I enjoy doing? So there's even though we're talking about some things maybe that are serious or that really hit at this really transitional moment that we're going through on the planet, there's still that sense of fun and lightness and being able to just be like, this is what's happening today. So all of that is part of why I like to talk to Claire. And is there anything that you want to say about what, your podcast at the moment or your practice or what you're offering?
Oh, thanks, Megan, first of all, for having me here. And it's a joy and a privilege to be able to address your community. You know, um, Urotherapy, Shivambu has changed my life so dramatically. I think it is in part responsible for how much my podcast, for example, has grown and the way that I have felt my authentic voice coming out more and more, and other people have noticed it too. So, like anything that you create, it's part of you, right? So your channel is part of you. My podcast, The Gray Space, is part of me, and it's a reflection of me. And so, it grows and it evolves with us, and I think that's part of the joy of having a channel or having a podcast and being able to sort of track that growth too, look back and see how much you've changed. And so, yeah, and I can definitely say that working with urine has been a huge part of that evolutionary impulse that leap, the leaps that I keep taking.
So I mentioned when we were chatting before we started recording that part of what I wanted to ask you about specifically was what you noticed when you started your practice, because that really stood out to me when you told me the story about it when you originally, the first time we ever talked. And part of what I remember was about your eyes and about your energy. And I'll let you take over from there. But this is something, and I'm bringing it up because a lot of people come to Shivambu because they have a very specific physical ailment often because we're human and we're in a physical body and we don't want to be in pain or discomfort. And that's absolutely a great reason to come to Shivambu because it does help with a lot of things. But sometimes people aren't ready or don't realize the way Shivambu works holistically with the entire system. And so they start it because they have rashes and it's really good for skin. It's absolutely fantastic for skin. And although maybe the rash gets better or it doesn't get better right away, or it takes 6 months or it takes a year or whatever it takes, on the side, these other things can start to happen. And so I thought your example was really great about some of the other things that can start to happen. So now I'll be quiet, but please tell the story.
Well, I love telling the story. I mean, the funny thing is that, I was introduced to the practice as part of yoga training years before I actually got into it. And when I was first introduced to it, even though intellectually and spiritually, there was a feeling of yes, yes, I get it. This is true. This is real. This is right. I was really kind of divided inside because there was another part of me that was like, gross,
Oh,
like, yeah. So the part of me that got it, that knew, was really wanting to try it and wanting to derive benefits from it. But the conditioned and programmed part of me, and the part of me that hadn't really forgiven me, wasn't accepting me, was repulsed. And I took one sip to start the practice for the week, and I was like, I mean, it was like I couldn't handle it. And so I was a little bit disappointed in myself because I just knew that there was something in it, but I couldn't get past a feeling of disgust. And so I let it go for a couple of years. And then, because of Charlotte, our friend Charlotte, she and I had a conversation, and she brought it up again. And I just had this feeling like, I know I need to be doing this. I want to be doing this, but something in me couldn't get past that first experience too. So I started just using it on my skin. That was how I started. And, within a week, I was rubbing it all over my body every day. And then I started putting it in my eyes. And, I was using it topically, and it intensely, and I was trying to drink it, but I wasn't able to get past that. I tried putting juice in it. I tried, but I still couldn't quite get there with drinking it. But I was applying it topically for about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years, before I realized suddenly one day, because I couldn't find my sunglasses, that I hadn't actually worn my sunglasses in a really long time. And I live in the south of France, where it's 300 days of sunshine a year. And I, typically my whole life had really sensitive eyes. My grandmother used to wear her sunglasses in the house. And sometimes I would do that too. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going to be just like my grandmother. And I realized I haven't had my sunglasses. Where are they? Where even are they? And that's when I started thinking, well, wait a second. I haven't used my reading glasses in ages either. I haven't had any issues driving at night because I was starting to have those flares at night. Like, I was not very comfortable when oncoming headlights and all of that. I realized that had not been a problem. And, everybody around me of my generation was using their reading glasses when we'd go to a restaurant and stuff like that. And I realized I was the only one in my family kind of looking around with all my cousins and everything who wasn't using glasses. So it kind of crept in quietly, but I realized that my vision had improved. And so that really stayed with me. But it wasn't until 2 or 3 months later that I started drinking it. And the way that that happened was that I was actually in a really low place emotionally. I had just been through, here's the other thing, right? Shivambhu brings changes, and of course I bring changes. I initiated changes in my life that had to happen, but it was a very painful, emotionally, very painful period where, I basically my whole life was just collapsing, and I knew that, and I knew that, I was walking through the fire. But there were some really tough days, and I was also in pain. My joints were hurting. I went to see a naturopathic doctor, and she was like, you know, she told me I was at risk for stroke, and I was like, what? I mean, like, I've never had any health problems my whole life, but I really felt like something was off, and I started just that day. I remember feeling really low, really down. And I'm telling you, I heard the voice in my head say, drink your pee now. And I literally went into the bathroom and drank my pee, the whole glass, like a big glass, drank it down. And I was like, I don't have a problem with this anymore.
hmm.
It was like necessity I just dropped whatever psychological thing had been in my way. And that's when I started looping my urine like crazy. And I looped every day until mid to late afternoon for 6 months
Mm.
every day.
So
But
looping,
leading up to that,
just
say again.
yeah, just for people going, what's looping? Looping is drinking as much of your output as you can during the day. Like every, if you can loop for a day, you can loop for an afternoon, you can loop for, you said, for about 6 months. Um, Not necessary. Just so people are wondering, do I have to do that? Not necessary, but it is a practice and people call it looping. And if you hear it again, that's what we're talking about. So yes, please continue.
Right on, right on. Well, and that, like you said, not, you don't have to do that. It's just that's what I did, and nobody told me to do that. I just knew to do that, and the practice working with your urine is completely intuitive. It reconnected me to my intuition in a big way. And the first thing that I noticed after I started looping was within 36 hours, my mood completely shifted. Completely shifted. Like I had been living under dark clouds, it felt like. And suddenly it was like the clouds parted and the sun started to shine. And I was like, oh my God. It was such a relief. And then the next thing was I got sick, right? I had like a healing crisis. I got all my head filled up, and I've never been so happy to be sick. I knew that it was the urine. And I was like, yes, bring it on, bring it on. And so I just was like, I just wanted to like swim and bathe in urine all the time. I just was like, it's as much as I had been turned off by it at the beginning, suddenly I was like, oh, I want it all over me. I want it in me. I was, eyes, ears, nose, using it in every possible way. I started evolving it right away. I had started, getting the jars out and going, but it was all totally intuitive, At the same time, I was doing reading and research, and because I like to do that, but I guess, kind of right brain, left brain, both of it. I just allowed myself to be guided. And yeah, I had this congestion in my head for about a week, and then that dissipated. And then I started to cry. There was a lot of crying. And it was this strange thing that happened with my vision. First I noticed my physical vision had improved, and then it was like multidimensional vision. And you know, I think I was pretty aware of the Matrix
Mm-hmm.
back then. I mean, I was really had gone down a lot of rabbit holes, and I was starting to understand, but this is when it was like literally the scales falling from my eyes, and I could see everything that was happening, and I was so horrified, by what I could see that it was there was a lot of grief that came up, feelings of betrayal and feelings of, all of this stuff when you trusted the system, or some people never did. Some people were a lot smarter than I was, but I was a good girl. I grew up, being a good girl and doing what people told me, and trusting authority and all that, because I had wonderful parents, and so they were my model, and I just trusted them. So why wouldn't I just trust the world, and trust the government, and trust so that was part of my learning, was, to hang on a second, learn how to be discerning. And, you know, Shivambhu really helped me. I don't know how I make that connection. I just know it. I
Mm-hmm.
just know that that was happening. And it was like every single day, like more shedding of more illusions, letting go of, and I made other big changes in my life, like just like one thing after another. And so it was this huge, intense period of growth. And I guess I was just ready for it. And the biggest thing, Megan, and this is what I always tell people when because, now I include urine therapy in my work as a coach, as in my work as a health coach, as a mentor for personal and spiritual growth, because I consider it to be a multidimensional technology. And, I'm based on my own experience, I can, help get people started. And so I've had a number of clients who have started the practice on their own, totally intuitively, with a little bit of guidance from me. And one of the things that I always tell people, because it was so huge for me, was what a healer Shivambu is. It totally healed my self-loathing.
Mm.
And I realized in retrospect that the disgust that I experienced when I first tried to practice and all the times that I tried to drink and I just couldn't was just a reflection of my own self-hatred and self-loathing and the parts of me that disgusted me that I had not yet integrated. And as I went through this huge change in my own life and let go of facades and let go of masks and let go of having to have my life look a certain way, based on what I imagined was the successful version of me, and I let go of all of my lies and lying to myself and lying to other people and the false persona. It was a huge integration of the shadow that occurred. And then I became palatable to myself.
So this, I'm so glad that you've brought us to that point in the understanding and the journey. One of the things I started saying a couple of years ago when I was teaching courses, and I don't remember how it first sort of came out of me as words, but the version of it is to say it's it's one of the reasons Shivambu is a self-love practice. And we talk so much in the spiritual world about doing like loving yourself, and you have to love yourself first before you can love other people. And we all understand that, yeah, those are nice words, but it's very hard to do anything with them when you're dealing with layers of psychology and emotion and trauma and experience and generational ancestry, whatever. There's so many things that are in there. And with Shivambu, this is exactly a different, I'm sort of saying it from the other side of what you said, but whoever's listening, like whatever side of this, whatever way, not there's two sides, but just whatever approach with words resonates for you, take that and run with it, because you have to accept exactly who you are and where you are in that moment in order to drink your Shivambu, your urine. And we use the word Shivambu, and I didn't explain it at the beginning, but if you watch any of the other videos that I have, you've heard me explain Shivambu many times. But it's the Sanskrit word for urine, and it's Shiva, Lord Shiva, and Ambu, which is water. And so you have water of Shiva, which is water of God, divine water, holy water, water of consciousness, water of awareness, divine holy water of consciousness, awareness, and auspiciousness, however you want to phrase it. So that's um, why I love to use the word Shivambu. It's also the tradition it was taught to me, and I was taught it to it through yoga philosophy. And so that's how I was taught it, and that's how I like to continue working with it. But um, you can't, you can try to drink, and I did too. For the first 6 months, I tried and I could not get it down. And even with a little tiny shot glass and like, just take a sip, just take a sip, I just could not do it. And there's this, whatever that shift is that happens. And there's some people, I do have a few people who are part of my clients or my world where I've said what Shivambu was, what they should do. And the next day they send me a message. Okay, so I woke up this morning, I drank a cup of it. Now what do I do?
Exactly. Me too.
Not my experience. How did you do that? So there are people who can do it. So if you can drink it, go for it. Don't feel like you're weird because you can drink it and you're not hesitating. That's fantastic. But with that sense, one of the things that I've seen in myself, but over and over again in everyone who reports back to me, is this sense of it is a very deep self-love practice, and you can't hate yourself and drink your pee every day. You can't do it. And so but it doesn't, it's not a fight that goes on within you. Once you start drinking it, it's like it just dissolves all the parts of you that have an issue with you.
So true.
And it doesn't, it's not a big dramatic debate. And it doesn't mean that everything you have to work on is gone either. So it's not that it does the shadow work for you, but it makes it way easier to do it when you actually use another method, or you go into meditation, or you pick whatever it is you're going to pick. It doesn't feel like it's such a huge pile of things to move as it did before you'd worked with the Shivambu.
So true. That's definitely my experience. And you actually want to do the shadow work, you know? You stop avoiding things. You know, you get more interested in the feeling of not rightness when it comes up, right? Because I guess you spend more time aligned, right? And so when you realize something's not aligned, you're interested and you want to go looking. And it's not, you know, with any kind of self-criticism or self-judgment. It's more like, oh, something's off in there. What could it be? You know, there's a more loving approach, more compassionate, and I mean, I just can't even, it's really hard to describe, really hard to articulate that feeling. Self-love turns out to be nothing like what you think it is from the other side of it, you know, before you understand, you know, it's like you said, like in self-help circles and personal growth and spiritual growth circles, you know, self-love is this everybody, you know, love yourself. Well, most of us don't even know what that means. And, you know, we can talk about it and then it just becomes another should, like, oh, I should be loving myself, you know. It's all theoretical and we have an idea of what it might be, but it turns out what it is it's nothing like what I thought.
Yeah.
It's just such a simple thing, such a basic melting kind of tenderness toward
Well,
all life.
and there, when you said the word melting, that because it's like, how do you describe it in words? And what was coming to me was the sense of like, I had so much gratitude to my
Yes.
Shivambu, and
Okay.
gratitude opens the heart, which is that melting feeling, or it's one
Yeah.
of the melting feelings.
Yeah.
Um, and so part of it then becomes you have a sense of gratitude to the Shivambu, and then you realize the Shivambu is you, and then you
Yeah.
realize you can feel gratitude to you, and then your heart opens, and it's much, and then you soften, and as soon as you soften, all of the gifts that are waiting, and this is again, this is like now we're getting to spirit, then we're getting the woo woo talk, but Shivambu again, it's like that. What are the gifts that are waiting? It's like you yourself have been building up these things you want to give yourself, and you don't allow yourself to give them to yourself. And so it's like there's this pile of goodness waiting. And when you can soften and accept it, suddenly it's like, oh, okay. And whatever that is, whether it's I can take a nap, I can take a rest when I need it, I can speak up for myself when I need it, I can tackle that project. It doesn't all mean rest and falling asleep. Some of it can be I can use my energy to do the thing that actually will lead me to the next thing that I want to do. But there's this, the gifts that are there are actually ones that we have placed there for ourselves.
Well, and once you are okay with yourself, more than okay, right? The great, we could say, well, I won't use that word, disease of humanity. The great lie that we've been programmed with is that we're unworthy
Yeah.
and inferior. And when you no longer buy into that, and you know that you are a full universal fractal of the source and endowed with access to energy and power to infinity, when you know who you are, nobody can tell you different. Nobody can fool you. Nobody can put you down. And there's a kind of grounded righteousness that you begin to feel. It's not an anger. It's a it's a real feeling of sovereignty. Well, nobody's going to push you around anymore. You're not going to, because you don't doubt
Mhm.
yourself. Doubt is the killer, right? You don't doubt your worth anymore.
Mhm.
And once you are free from this crippling doubt about your worthiness, you're out of the matrix.
Mhm. And that happens both immediately, like as soon as you're willing to rub pee on your body, you've exited. Like
Yes.
we're talking red pill, blue pill. Like as soon as you're willing to do that, you're out. But then the awareness that goes with it builds over time.
Agreed.
So you don't, it's
Yeah.
not like you get download and suddenly everything's in. You do work with the practice, and over time it accumulates, and you look back, like you said, you looked back and you could tell like your multidimensional in, connection to vision and intuition was both a physical manifestation over time, but also an interior way of looking. And
Yeah. It's
the,
almost like that red pill moment, right? That it's like suddenly you're on another timeline,
yes,
right? It's that the railroad tracks have gone chunk like
yeah,
that, right? So you may not be at your destination yet, not that we have a destination, but you're not there yet, but you're now on another track. You're
yeah.
now on another timeline. And then it's all discovery, little by little.
And some of these things, like when we say exit the matrix too, some people could think, well, I don't know if I want to exit the matrix. And it's like, well, but this word sovereignty I find really helpful, and this idea of grounded righteousness, where part of what starts to happen is to see the body as being incredibly self-sourced. And so that's part of exiting the matrix, where you don't feel dependent on a specific way of doing things, that there are a multiplicity of way of doing things. And not every human's going to do them the same way, but they're still okay. There's multiple ways of doing, there's multiple ways of connecting with source. There's multiple ways of deciding what is nourishing for your body. And there are so many, like, even just this is part of it, where to me, Shivambhu is deep nutrition and deep hydration. And so, do I enjoy being able to get water to make herbal tea because I like herbal tea and I also like a good chai? Like, yes, I really enjoy being able to do those things. But if they weren't available to me, I could be just fine with my Shivambu for a very, very long time. And I don't feel scared by that.
Absolutely.
And that's massive as humans on this planet, where we feel very fragile. And if,
Yeah, especially now.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so,
And actually, yeah, it's like this empowerment thing where you realize, wait a second. Yeah, not only am I physically self-sourcing, but that's just the physical layer. I am self-sourcing. I am a toroidal field.
mhm,
And there is an infinite source of energy within me. And this is what, in a way, the matrix was designed to keep us in ignorance of. Because we are this the most potent form of energy in the universe, in this avatar, right? In this human incarnational vessel. That's why we are used as a battery, right? To quote the movie.
yep.
And but that is literal. And so you can't continue to exploit a population who knows that they are plugged into an infinite source of energy. So they have to keep the population in ignorance of that. And the minute you begin Shivambu, you start to experience that renewal, that regeneration, and the fact that you are self-sourced and self-sourcing. And not just, I mean, this gets into such incredible dimensions, but there's the mystical dimension of Shivambu too, right? There's just something going on there that is beyond the actual physical nourishment that you experience and the emotional healing that happens, the sharpening of your mental acuity, the multidimensional vision, the lifting of the veil, all of that, starts to get into other areas, which are really heady. And I don't mean that in an intellectual sense. You start to go, whoa, what is in there? There you start to get into light, and to me, and now I'm speaking purely from my own intuitive feeling of it, but now it's been a year and a half of daily drinking, and plus the time that I spent before that applying it topically. And I know I'm still just at the beginning of my journey, and yet I can feel that this is a practice that bridges to the light body. Do you
Yeah.
know? I believe that this is a support, um, it is bringing online my light body. That's what I feel. And how can I prove it? How can I can't. I just know. And and the other thing, I mentioned intuition, but it has really strengthened my ability to trust my intuition. And I realized, oh, I've always been intuitive. I just didn't trust my intuition. I didn't really trust it, unless it was like so obvious. But now I'm much more inclined to trust that, well, I know what I know.
Mhm.
The knower in me knows.
Yeah. There's a couple of videos on my channel where I'm talking with Fiona Gardner, who does work with blood and urine, and her training is in blood, but she has then got into studying the urine. And there's also some with Peter Copping and one with two with Peter and Fiona. So if what Claire is saying is pinging for you in terms of Shivambhu, light, fractals, sacred geometry, why it ups things. We cover some of that in those, or those videos will give you some ways of understanding the concepts that are coming out in this video. Not that, because we don't want to go down the road of trying to explain a bunch of different words that have now come out, but there's some other stuff there that could help. But part of what Claire said about what you just said about light, this is one of the things that Fiona Gardner sees immediately. And I want to repeat this. I have said this in another video, but it's such an amazing thing, and it hits me every time. She has a couple of slides where she shows two clients before they drank Shivambhu, their urine, and she's looking at the crystalline formations in the urine. So these are very obviously not just debris. Like, they have such a strong crystalline form. It's obvious that there is something going on there. And before these two examples she gives, before these two people drank their urine, and she looked at the urine, it's sort of messy. It just looks kind of like there's some like basic pattern there, but she's always looking for pattern, geometry, light, and color in the crystalline form. And there's really almost nothing. And one of the people, it was a week later, and they drank like their urine once. The other person, I'm not sure what the timeline was, but both of them, it's like before and after. And before is just sort of muddy and not that interesting. And after, the shapes are like, it looks like jewelry. You know what I mean? Like the crystalline forms are exact. They're multifaceted. They're very different as well, because everyone's very different in terms of what the crystalline forms are. But there's structure, there's color, and there's light. And it's this light that's in there. And so when you say it's helping to actually, like, it can access your light body. And if you're talking in esoteric terms, if you're talking in yoga or other things, we talk about the etheric body, the light body, the emotional body, the brain body, like the physical body. There's all these bodies, and they extend out beyond the physical to from what we can see. And there's different traditions conceptualize it slightly differently, but you can see that we're all talking about the same thing in the end. And what we see with Shivambhu itself, it's a structured water. Structured water carries a charge. It's an electrical charge. And so when we drink the Shivambhu back in, we're giving ourselves an electrical charge that is a negative electrical charge, which it feeds our battery, so to speak. So suddenly, the energy our body took to create the Shivambhu and structure the water is not just going out the door and being wasted. I mean, wasted. If it's given back to the earth, it's not wasted. But if it's going to the sewage system, no one's benefiting from that. If we take it back in, suddenly the body's like, oh, I just put a bunch of energy into that, and you're giving it back to me. Oh, great. Now I can make more. And so you
Yes.
get this exponential growth. So when you're looping, one of the things that starts to happen is you are taking your own energy production, feeding it back in. And this is this idea of self-sourcing, that you are
Yes.
sourcing your own energy back into your system. And then your system is so grateful that you gave it back this thing it's been making your whole life and going like, could you just use it? It's right there. And now the body's like, oh, you're using it. And so then it's so happy you're using it. It starts to do things with this extra energy and this extra potential. And that's part of the growth that we then see when we look backward and go, when did I start to do this? When did I start to think this way? When did I start to change my life in these ways? And it's like, well, I had all this extra energy that was from me to begin with. And my system, etheric body, light body, like all these other systems that are online are benefiting from this charge, because it's not just going to sit there and just like do nothing. It's going to perpetuate something. And it's like almost in the background, things start changing.
It's so true. And I mean, I practically was jumping up and down when you were talking about what happens when you're looping, because that was one of the big discoveries for me too. And it was like, you know how you can only really learn something deeply when you've been through it, right? And suddenly I was like, oh, I'm infinite. I'm infinite. I'm a generator, right? Because the more you drink, when you're looping, you discover it never stops. It never stops. If I start drinking, it will just keep producing more and more. And I remember you telling me at the time last year, you said it's washing you, right? The more, and it might have had to do with where I was in my detox process at the time, but even now, if I decide, oh, I need to loop today, then if I start drinking, like I've got to stop drinking by 2 or 3 because it produces so much that it's demonstrating the principle, the natural principle of abundance, starting from like nothing. If you retake in your own essence, right? If you activate that feedback, then your capacity grows and grows. I mean, it won't stop. And that's when I realized I'm rich. I am so rich. I can create this. My body is doing it, and all I have to do is take it back in. Is say yes. And the gratitude, right? You use that word again, and I thought, yes, I mean that's why gratitude is such a huge principle in abundance, right? When we're trying to learn how to be abundant again, we're just really realigning with our original template, our organic template, and that's one thing that Shivambhu does so beautifully too, right? Is it realigns us with what is real, what the organic template of humanity. And here we are living in a time where, there's a big fork in the road and we've got to choose. Do you want to be an organic human or do you want to be, melded with technology and into the hive mind? If you'd like to remain an organic human with a connection to source and to
The
the
other half of mine.
mother, yeah, yes, right. I mean, the mother earth and the sun and the infinite field,
Yeah.
right? Then Shivambu definitely helps with that. I also think that there's a form of protection that occurs,
Mm.
like especially when you're putting it on your skin, especially if I'm traveling. Airports are so terrifying and so dehumanizing nowadays. I've got a jug. It's my little urine jug. Actually, it's a big urine jug. And I travel with that in my bag and I cover myself in the morning like I always do, but like extra layers to protect my field because of all of the EMF smog that's everywhere and all of the entrainment in the frequency entrainment in the field. I really feel like, if I'm well covered in Shivambu and I'm drinking it and I've got my jug with me and I'm like, all I have to do is go into the bathroom, or if I'm on the plane, I drink the whole time when I'm traveling. because I feel like I need to,
Makes a difference. Yeah.
it's a huge protection in environments like that. Not only physically, but also it's somehow, I don't know, I'm again, this is just intuitive, but it feels to me like it somehow protects you from mental entrainment, in mind control frequencies.
Mhm.
You can stay clear,
Mhm.
and you're less likely to, be sort of harvested, have your mental energy harvested, or yeah.
Yeah. It so this is one of the interesting things about it because if anyone has been reading about structured water and they look at Dr. Gerald Pollack's work, there's just whether it's his work or people talking about his work, there's lists of all the benefits of drinking structured water. And in this case, fourth phase water, plasma phase water, EZ water, EZ water, different
Huh.
ways to say it, exclusion zone water. But all the benefits that are listed there are all the benefits that people who work with Shivambhu talk about. So that was one of my like, oh, this is structured water. That's what we're talking about. That's what's going on here. And one of them is EMF. And they've actually shown that with the structured water in his tests, that structured water helps the body deal with EMF. And so we know that Shivambhu is following all of the same categories and criteria as his work. He hasn't studied urine that I know of, but you can make the correlation really easily, um, in terms of what people report, what we see, what we feel, what's going on. And definitely it's a huge thing with radiation. And whether it's your devices in your home that we have to use to do the things that we're doing like right now, or flying. Because yeah, I just flew. I had a 24-hour travel period on Wednesday and was on planes for about 10 or 11 hours. And I use it in so many ways. When I'm on the plane, I have a little spritzer that I have aged in, and I spray
Yeah.
my hands, I spray up my nostrils, I put it in my mouth, I'll redo my face, um, as well as drinking fresh while I'm traveling. And it does it when you're that far off the ground as well, if you're flying, because training is different, right? If you're in a car, but especially when you're flying, all the principles of vata in the Ayurvedic tradition and yoga tradition, vata is very swirly and out here in the ethers in the air. And it's very hard to feel connected, grounded, connected to your intuition because everything's up. And the Shivambu seems to immediately bring me back to that sort of sense of internal grounding rod, that
Yeah.
internal space, which is aligned. So even if I just feel like I'm kind of tuning out everything else, it allows me to tune it out easier than it used. It doesn't feel like so much effort.
Yeah, it's almost like you're wrapped in a Faraday bag.
Yeah. 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 So again, like whether we don't have exact tests, again, somebody before they fly, somebody after they fly, someone who's drinking their fresh, using evolved while flying, I don't know, but it feels different. Definitely there's a big, and the amount, like just in terms of needs as well. Like when I go to the airport now, I don't bring I don't bring food of any huge significance. I mean, I might have some dried fruit or nuts because I like those. But now if I go through an airport, I'll buy a fresh juice if I really feel like I want something else. And if I don't get anything the whole time, I don't need it. And I
Yeah.
realized after years of travel how airports are set up to feed. That's
It's
the main
true.
thing they're doing.
It's a consumer paradigm. Yeah. I mean, you become the consumer. They want to make sure. I mean, I had this experience going through Stansted Airport a couple months back where it was so clear. I was like, oh, I mean, there's so many people, right? And you get shunted through these little mazes, right? And you have to walk where they say you have to walk, and and then you get sort of spat out after security into the duty free, right? And you have to walk a little path through the duty free, which is full of toxic everything, with spraying perfume and all kinds of, I mean, like it's just it's so obvious. I don't see how it can, how people can't see what is happening to them, they're like, bye, bye, bye. It's like that movie They Live. Do you remember that movie from the 80s called They Live? Where the guy he gets a special pair of glasses and suddenly he can see what's going on in the Matrix, and he sees all these zombies all around. And anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
But yeah, after the duty free, then you're in the food court, right? And so and there's not enough places to sit, and so you have to wander around, right? And so eventually you're going to buy something, you're going to eat something, you're going to consume something,
Yeah.
right? And it's almost like this forced consumption, right? So if you're not grounded in environments like that, then you just, go to the lowest common denominator. And I don't always succeed, but I'll tell you, I mean, I'm much more likely now to fast when I'm traveling and fast on Shivambhu. And anytime I don't feel good, if I feel like I've been pulled off center or I've been in a really dense environment where there's a lot of, spraying up there and a lot of really, tough energy, I will fast and fast on Shivambu to get myself grounded and feeling centered again. Yeah, it's a great help for that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like there's a whole more that there's so much we could say about travel and about a bunch of aspects that come up in that and about how
Yeah.
that's sort of a microcosm for what we're actually experiencing all the time, but it really highlights what's going on. And I have a couple of travel stories, but there's a couple things I want to, so I'm flagging that partially, so I'll see it in my notes later. One of the things I wanted to talk about before we finish today was the difference between before we talk about Shivambu publicly and after. And when you had me on last year, I think that was if I remember correctly, it just having me on was sort of a way to introduce the fact that you were doing this. Like you
Yeah.
had done a whole episode on Shivambu before, and I know what it's like. The first time I was interviewed and I knew it was going to go out, and it was on someone's podcast who had a lot of followers. And I'm like, a lot of people are going to hear this. And I don't know those people, but a lot of people are going to hear this. And am I okay with that? And it turns out I was, because I'm still doing this. And uh, but one of the biggest things that I hear from people, and whether it's in comments on videos or whether it's in groups when I'm part of a workshop or when I'm teaching, and I have a new person who just joined my membership last week, and one of our first things was, "My husband thinks I'm crazy." And it's like, "Yep, yep, that's going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen." But there's a line between we have to do enough of this practice ourselves. We have to have enough experience in ourselves before we start telling people, because the weight of the collective unconscious
Yeah.
around things that are disgusting or meant to be disgusting is so huge. And we've managed to flip our own internal switch and go over to, okay, I'm going to try this thing. And I was disgusted. Now I'm not sure where I am on the whole disgust thing, but I think it's worth doing, or I know it's worth doing, but I still understand the disgust. And now I'm 12 years in. So although I remember being disgusted, I forget how disgusted people are. Sometimes I'm like, oh, right, I have to put on the lens so that I say things in a way that people can accept it, or at least accept the idea that there are humans who do this. But I wanted to get into like, what was that part of that transition for you between I can't tell anyone to now you talk about it a lot and a lot of people are trying it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great joy. To me, it feels like an absolute joy. And it's not about the Shivambu. It's about I'm just me now.
Mm-hmm.
That was like, yeah, I mean, obviously that can be a big stumbling block for people. And talking about that openly, definitely shifted for something for me. But the result is now, I don't have a problem with me anymore. So if I don't have to, I was an approval seeker most of my life. I was just wanting to be nice so that people would like me and that would be okay. And, I don't mind what anybody thinks now. It's okay. We can't I did a podcast episode on this earlier in the year. It was called "Welcome to My Bonkers Pavilion" because my husband was in the habit of joking with me about how weird I am, and calling it my bonkers pavilion, right? He's like, like, oh, you just sit over there in your bonkers pavilion, and lovingly, right?
Yeah.
So that became kind of a jokey expression between us. But I really embraced my bonkers pavilion
Mm.
after fully opening up about Shivambhu. And I came to realize, well, everybody's weird. Everybody's unique. I mean, if everybody's weird, nobody's weird. We've all got our habits. We all have our uniqueness. And when you cross that line into real self-love, which has nothing to do with ego and it has nothing to do with an inflated sense of self that is coming from a place that isn't real, that deep self-acceptance, that's the work we came here to do. Integration of all the polarities, of all of our light and all of our dark. That's what we're here to do. And once we stop making a big drama out of life, and we just accept that we have our dark side, we have our shadows, and we can integrate those by totally accepting them and realizing, okay, who doesn't have a shadow? If you're on this earth now in a human body, you've been through the whole universal journey. You've done a thing or two, and so nobody can throw any stones, nobody can cast any stones. It's just integration that we're here to do, right? So Shivambu was a huge, huge transformative tool for that. That deep acceptance, that deep self love, that melting, of the internal walls of sequestering parts of yourself from other parts of yourself and not wanting to see things and not wanting to, once all of that stuff is dissolved, you don't have any stress anymore. I mean, your stress, let's say your stress level is extremely reduced.
Yeah.
And I also noticed that I started sleeping, like sleeping so much better. I used to have terrible sleep. My sleep would be interrupted at the drop of a hat, you know? And I think because the the balm of the self-acceptance and self-love, it's so peaceful. Your stress level goes way down. You've got nothing to hide from yourself anymore, much less from anybody else. And it's not that you're shoving yourself down other people's throats, not imposing anything on anybody. But, I don't mind if people find out stuff about me. I don't mind. And I openly talk about some things in my life that I used to hide, you know. And I think that's part of the healing because it gives everybody permission to just be yourself, just accept everything. And I'll tell you a little humorous anecdote on the way to the Bonkers Pavilion being revealed for all to see, was that when Charlotte came to visit in the spring, she came to visit me here, and she said, well, while I'm there, maybe we could do some kind of workshop or something like that for the folks around, and so we decided we'd do a workshop together on urine therapy, and I thought, I mean, I live in small village France. Okay. I'm not on the Côte d'Azur, where a lot of sophisticated people and jet setters are. I'm in the country, and I've been teaching here for 3 years, and I built a considerable community around weird stuff, but I hadn't really openly spoken to them about urine therapy. And so when Charlotte came to visit, I said, let's do it. Let's offer a workshop, and whoever comes comes. And we ended up having a very good attendance, and several people began to experiment with urine therapy and Shivambhu after. But on the way to that, I was thinking, okay, I got to let some WhatsApp groups know about it. And I talked to my landlady here, and because she's open-minded, and I said, are there any groups that I could post this on? And she said, yeah. She gave me a couple of names of groups, and she said, actually, on second thought, I would put it in this group and not that group. And I said, okay, all right. And I got them mixed up, and I posted it on what ended up being the small French village happenings group, rather than the women's group,
Mm.
who might have been more open. And it went out, and within a few moments, I got a message back, somebody saying, "No, thank you," with this emoji, like ooh, and then another message saying, "I'm sorry, who are you?" you know. And then my friend, my landlady, sent me a private message saying, "No, no, not this group, not this group." And I said, "It's too late.
It's
The
too late.
cat is out of the bag." It's too late. And I was like, I had that moment where I'm like, now they all know there's a weirdo in their midst.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was so funny. And then I heard later that they were talking about it at the little town hall, that they had a meeting, and they were like, what is this about someone doing a workshop on pee? You know, and but I'd say I had about 30 seconds of embarrassment when I realized, okay, this went out to the wrong group. That's what in French they call an acte manqué. It's like accidentally on purpose,
Yeah.
Okay, whoops, oopsie. All right. Well, that was clearly meant to happen, and I'm not going to take it back, and I'm not going to apologize. Yes, we're doing a workshop on urine therapy right here in this village. And a dozen people came. So, you know, I think just little stories like that, for me, there are no accidents,
No.
and it's something I've laughed about a lot since. And Charlotte and I had a good old guffaw about that, and we had a great time leading the workshop. And I know that it changed some people's lives, and I know that there are people who are practicing urine therapy, and now their children, their young children. In fact, one of my yoga students told me recently that her little boy, who is 5 or 6 years old, she overheard him playing with one of his friends, and he was correcting his friend. He said, "No, pee isn't dirty. Pee is good for you."
Oh, yeah.
Like, wow. I mean, you just never know how far the ripples go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel totally empowered by the practice of Shivambu. It's changed my life. It's helped me become more authentically, just let go of what wasn't authentic and real, and just live live as I am. Just be what I am. And yeah, I mean, there's a great deal of peace in that. You can't buy it. It's just it's something that you live, and the gratification is its own reward.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful way to finish off this particular discussion. Just to come back to there's a peacefulness that
Yeah.
comes from all the things, all the reasons we've already said, all the aspects of this practice, and they come from experience. And humans only learn from experience anyway. We can read books about other people's experience and imagine, but until we do it ourselves, we don't know. And it's that experience. And so part of my goal with having these discussions available for people is to say there's my experience, but I'm just one person. And so I love having other people come on and talk about their Shivambu experience. And the overlap is massive in terms of people who practice report higher intuition, more gratitude, more self-love, more peace, more energy, and various types of healing crises. Like we all report those as well.
Yeah.
Um, And then there's the unique pieces. Like everybody has a specific way that their system and their Shivambu works with them. And that's part of the uniqueness of each person. And so I would say that the overarching things that we have in common are very high. I don't know, maybe it's like 80%. And then there's maybe 20% of the Shivambu experience, which is then very unique to how it unfolds for each person. But so much of it is like we all started at the womb with Shivambu. It unites us. It absolutely unites us as humans, and it unites us through the generations of the mothers that came before us, that every one of our mothers was in the womb of her mother in their Shivambu. And this is a universal divine ancestral liquid which has kept us going as a species on this planet the whole time we've been here. And that is that linkage through DNA, through ancestry, through energy is part of what we inherit when we're born. Each time, again, we inherit that tradition and the incredible amount of intelligence and information which is in Shivambu. So we're gonna have a lot. We're not gonna run out of things to talk about.
That's for sure. Well, and I love what you said about the 20%, right? Because the 20% is that's the uniqueness, that comes from the fact that your Shivambu is a tailor-made medicine just for you on multidimensional levels. What
Yeah,
could be better?
because your thing with the eyes, I love because that didn't happen to me. 12 years, and my eyes have done other things, but they didn't do what yours did in the first year, 2 years. And so that's part of it too, where it's like, well, what was it? And this is something, we could really go down a lot of different layers and peel things out and be like, what was it about your life at that moment that you needed to see? How did you notice what else you weren't seeing? And then what did it feel like when you did see those things? And how were they connected to the grief of the moment? And so eyes, the metaphor of eyes was really potent.
Yeah, because I needed to open my eyes and see.
Right.
I needed to wake up. I needed to see. And
Right.
that's exactly how it happened.
Yeah. And yeah, I would say Shivambu is always or almost always wakes, just starting it wakes people up in one way, shape, or form. Um, but for me, that it wasn't immediately that layer. And I've come to various layers around what am I seeing, what am I not seeing, what am I willing to look at, what am I not willing to look at in my own journey. But that's not the first thing, one of the first things that jumped out and really got me. It was other stuff um,
Yeah.
around my healing. And so this is also where it meets us where we're at, and each of us are at a different place. And this is part of the uniqueness. So that's just, again, there's so much richness in there about how it works and how we can come at it. So I want to thank you for joining me for this really rich discussion. And no, I mean, I try not to make too many notes, but I was like, amazing. Because I want to remember to ask a question later, but also because then I'm like, oh, all these things. Okay, these are all great topics, and these are great starting places to come back to. So next time we talk, we come
Yes.
for stuff that we can work with. So thank you so much, Claire, for joining me. Thank you, everyone who has come in and listened today. Any information about Claire and her podcast will be in the show notes, and of course, how to contact me. And I have a membership that goes all year long where people are a part of, we have calls every month, we have discussions, we have chats, but it's a safe place to discuss your Shivambu with people who are also doing it and also exploring on all parts of the spectrum of just started to 12 years in. So we've got a range of stuff for you. Thank you again, Claire.
It's been such an honor and a real pleasure. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Bye.